mess this time. Well, I guess you two already ate. Clever girl. Yes, this side is perfect. That should help. Alexa, can you order some toilet paper? The plants will need food tomorrow. Hey y'all, it's Kellen. Happy Wednesday. Let's get right into this prop build. First things first, I'm cutting up pieces of 3/4 inch and 1 inch PVC. The 1 inch piece is for the center, and the 3/4 inch pieces, there are 6, and those go on the outside. The length of the PVC will depend on the height of your pot. We cut ours so they sat 1/4 inch below the top edge of the pot. I then drilled holes, 1 in the center and 6 on the outside, underneath where each piece of PVC would sit. That way they would drain and not collect water. I then hot glued them into place and then placed painter's tape over the top so I didn't get concrete in the holes. I then mixed up a concrete in a bucket. Then using a small shovel, I then filled up each pot to be level with the top of the PVC. This was a 60-pound bag of generic concrete from Home Depot. There's no need to spend extra on rapid setting or anything like that, and we also used about 3/4 of the 60-pound bag. Concrete will help add some weight to these guys and prevent them from blowing over, and we also left them outside to cure for 2 weeks so the concrete could dry properly. I really love any excuse to work with concrete. Using the shape of the craft pumpkin to my advantage, I'm cutting out the mouthpiece from the top slice of the pumpkin where the stem is. I'm using a Dremel with a router bit to cut out my shape. You can do it with a knife, but it's a little bit more difficult. I've just found this is the fastest way for me. Once I cut the mouth out, I'm using a foam insulation shaper to clean up all the rough edges before I go back in and add the craft foam on the lips. Now to apply the craft foam to the lips, I'm rolling it out on a flat surface, making sure that the center is thick and the edges are thin. I'm laying it along the mouth that I cut out before using my thumbs to blend it into the foam pumpkin. To reactivate the foam and blend the edges, I'm dipping my hands into water and smoothing it out. It reactivates the clay foam. I'm then going to let these dry for about 24 hours. You could completely omit the last step and not add the craft foam for the lips and start painting here, because I think the shape looks pretty neat, and if you added teeth it would look awesome. Now that the concrete has had time to cure and dry properly, I'm picking off all the painter's tape and scraping off all the loose bits of concrete on the top before I vacuum. I'm now going to go through and add some acrylic latex caulk with silicone in a brown color all over the top of the concrete and around the top edges of the PVC. Those white chunks are just perlite. It's something you add to potty mix, and I wanted to add it because I thought it would add a bit of texture, although you really won't see this brown dirt once you put the plants in these pots, and I like that I can take the plants out and replace them for other plants at different times during the year. While I let these dry, I'm going to add some structure inside of the foam pumpkins. I'm drilling holes on the bottom sides of the pumpkins about 3/4 of the way back, and then installing some 1 inch PVC. I'm making sure to check it with my 3/4 inch dowel before I glue it in place with some hot glue. This will make sure that it won't be tilted or tipped to the wrong side, and this will allow me to take the pumpkins off later on for storage. I'm now adding some texture inside of the mouths with some Great Stuff foam. I'm sorry this was really hard to film because I had to be able to see inside of the pumpkins, but I'm starting with the back, making sure that I cover the pieces of PVC, and moving on to the lower and upper mouth. You see I'm using my finger to wipe along the edges. I'm just pushing the foam down after it's dried a little bit to make sure it doesn't push up too far past the lips and the gums and look weird. While the foam sets up, I'm going to add a bit of liquid nails to the outer seams of the lips. I didn't like how they dried, and I wanted to blend that seam a bit more, so I'm adding the liquid nails along the top and bottom edges of the lip and using my fingers to brush off or squeegee off the excess. This will help reinforce that seam and also help blend it visually. I just didn't like how it looked, and sometimes you just gotta stop and fix something. Now I'm going outside to the garage and starting painting the 3/4 inch dowels with some flat black exterior latex paint. I applied 2 coats and allowed them to dry before assembling them in the pots with the pumpkins on top. We purchased 3 6-foot grapevines from Michael's, 2 in green and 1 in purple. They're attached to the dowels by twisting the metal vines around, starting with the middle and working then to the bottom and to the top, attaching them with hot glue, and we used the green ones for the base and then cut the purple one in half and layered that on top. We placed 2 screws in the back so we could zip tie the ends of the vines to the back of the pumpkins. I'm now going through with some Great Stuff foam. I wanted the stem of my man-eating plant to be a bit more substantial and almost look like a topiary. I applied the foam carefully to the wire that all of the leaves are attached to. I then added some roots to the base and some little vines that were coming off. You certainly could omit this step, but I think it definitely adds something to the plant and some visual interest when you're up close to it. I'm also going to add some Great Stuff foam to the tops and back of the pumpkins to really add that plant-like look and some texture to help break up the smoothness of the surface of the pumpkins. And now we get to start painting. I'm using a aubergine dark purple spray paint for the insides of the mouths, and then using a green spray paint, Eden I think is the color, to go over the top of our Great Stuff foam vines, as well as spray paint the backs of the pumpkins. I'm then painting the front of the pumpkins with a tan colored paint, Fossil is the name of the color, before layering over the top of that with the Eden or green spray paint to help create sort of a gradient from front to back. The grapes were painted orange before moving back into the garage so I could paint the roots and the vines with some green UV Wildfire Effects glow paint. This is definitely a tedious process, but I really wanted the vine to pop at night. Now I always suggest if you are painting something with UV paint, always make sure that you have a UV light that you're using to paint it, as well as make sure that light source is pointed in the direction that the light source will be when you're displaying the item. There's nothing like having a light coming from above and then you actually are lighting it from below. That can jack up your paint job. Now that I've gone through and I painted all my roots with the green UV paint, I'm carefully going back in and I'm painting the grapes with some UV orange. I really wanted these suckers to pop and kind of look like seed pods. This was definitely a liberty that I took and wanted to add some visual interest to the grapes, so these are my little creepy seed pods. Now I'm getting really excited how these guys are looking, but they need some teeth. So I'm going to start by using some pumpkin teeth. These are in a medium and small size. They also have a larger size. I'll put a link below to their Etsy shop. These things are fantastic. I'm priming them with some flat white spray paint before going back in with some acrylic ivory colored paint and painting the fronts and backs of each of the teeth. You can see I stuck the teeth into some foam to make them easier to work with and paint. I'm now going through with my airbrush in a yellow color, I think it's called ochre, and airbrushing some tartar on the bottom, sides, and back of each tooth. I'm then going in with some watered down brown effects glaze paint and doing a wash and rub out on each tooth. I'm just brushing it on and using a paper towel to wipe the excess off. Love using these pumpkin teeth, definitely go check them out. Now I'm going through and I'm starting airbrushing some yellow paint around the lips just to help create more of a gradient to the green that's on the back before going in and starting my base color on the lips. I'm using a light pink to create my base layer and just outline the areas of the lips that I want before going back in with a red color in my airbrush and layering that on top. I'm also creating some texture with my airbrush by painting in some lines for the lips. I like going in with this lighter pink color first before going back in with the red on top because it creates some depth. You can have some problems when you're layering red on top of green paint. It can get really wonky or really muddy, so put the lighter color on first and then layer the darker color on top. You certainly don't have to paint the lips, or you could paint them a different color, whatever your fancy is. Now I'm going to add some texture and striping to the top. I really love the tiger stripe texture that they used on the original Audrey 2 plants. Trick is to start with the center vein, and then when you're painting the lines, make sure they point slightly towards the mouth. This will help enhance that pod-like shape. Then you can fill in with some little shaded lines in between. I'm using a dark green color, I think it's called Falto green, I'm probably pronouncing that terribly wrong, but it's just a dark green. I'm then going around and I'm adding some dark shadows into the vines, really into the recessed areas where I couldn't get the spray paint before. I'm now working down the plants on the other areas of the vines, spray painting mostly the back sides of the foam that I didn't hit prior. Working onto my shading around the lips, I'm going through and adding that dark green around the edges of the lips just to add a bit of a shadow to make them pop a bit more. I'm also adding the tiger striping from the top to the underside, as well as touching up any areas on the grate foam that I didn't hit with the glow paint or the spray paint. Alright, it's finally time. Let's add some teeth. I always start with the forefront canines first. I use 9 medium teeth and 12 small teeth for each plant. I started with the larger teeth and worked my way out. This is really just visual and can really make or break a mouth. I wanted them definitely to look like siblings but not look like twins. I wanted them to have 2 completely different personalities, and I think you can help sell this with how you arrange their teeth. The pumpkin teeth have little spikes in the bottom so they stick into foam great, and once I like the arrangement, I just glued them into place. I'm now going to move on to blending in and softening some of the glow paint. I put some brown paint into my airbrush, and I'm going around. I have my black light on, and I'm just layering the brown paint, especially around the edges of all the roots and the vines and all of those pieces of grate foam that I put the glow on. I want the glow to look like it's coming from underneath within the root or the vine of the plant, and I don't want it to look too harsh or too punchy. So I'm making sure that I have my light on, my UV light, and I'm working around and just softening all of the edges of the glow paint. Be careful not to completely paint over your UV paint. I'm going to take these guys out of the pots so we can work on the finish. I'm going to be using a brass metal effects paint from Design Masters. I like this stuff, it's just easy to use. I'm going to put on a heavy base coat, let that dry before applying a second layer, to which I'm going to spray the reaction solution on top before the paint dries. Now if you don't want to use this paint, go over and check out Van Oak Cemetery. He has a fantastic tutorial on how to do the patina without using the special paint. I'll leave a link below to his channel in that video. I'm now spraying the patina solution all over the second coat of wet paint. I'm making sure to saturate it because you only get one shot at this. Now this is time-lapsed, but this is what it looks like after it dries. Once it dries, I'm then going to go back in with a dry brushing technique where I take some of the brass paint on a dry brush, I wipe most of it off on a piece of cardboard, and then I lightly brush all of the high spots of the sculpture to make it pop. This really adds to the patina and helps sell the effect. Before I put the dowels back in, I'm just layering some sphagnum moss that I had on the base. We purchased 6 of the small Venus flytrap plants from Michaels. I placed those in the PVC holes around the outside, and now I'm going through and using a white paint to paint all the little teeth so they pop a little bit more because they just looked flat and kind of blended in with all the greenery. Moving back up to the mouths, I'm going to be using Wet from Fright Props. I love using this for the wet look around mouths and eyes and sweat and things like that. It's flexible and dries shiny and works perfect. I'm applying it to the lips, the teeth, and the gums pretty liberally. And finally, I'm going through and adding permablood to the lower lip and the leaves of each plant. I wanted it to be subtle, like they just had a snack maybe an hour prior. I'm applying it with a straw and just letting it drip down the lips and then brushing it on. I don't want it to be very heavy, and I definitely don't want it to wash out all of the teeth. Very subtle, very creepy. And finally, I'm going through with some black in my airbrush just to add some shading and also to blend in any areas that I didn't like or wasn't happy with, any spots where the foam was still peeking out. And now let's check out some super fancy 360 shots of each of the plants. I really love how these guys turned out. They're gonna pop during the day and at night with the glow paint. They're menacing and also kind of cute at the same time. I really love how these turned out. They just look like they have 2 completely different personalities, and I'm in love with them. This was a really fun build. I did it over the course of a few weekends while doing the prop makeover videos, and I really enjoyed this as a side project and love having them on our front porch. We've definitely got a lot of looks and a lot of laughs from people delivering packages as well as our neighbors. And I also want to mention that once all of the paint was dry, we applied 2 layers of a flat clear coat to all of the painted surfaces, including the pot. This is to help protect it from the elements here in Texas and to make sure that it lasts for a long time. Now let's take a closer look at these 2 beauties. I hope you guys enjoyed this prop build. This was so much fun for me. I've been a huge fan of Little Shop of Horrors ever since I can remember, and have been fortunate enough to be a part of many stage productions and various performances throughout the years. I always have fun doing it. The puppets, the actors, it's such a fun play, and this was really a fun project. Now I know it's a little different than the usual prop makeovers that we do, but we had some requests for some original prop builds, and this was something that we were working on that I thought would be fun to share. Now, being a huge fan of Little Shop of Horrors, anytime I see or hear about man-eating plants or something like that, my antennas always peak up and I'm always super interested. So when I heard that Michaels was going to be selling some man-eating plants this year in their Halloween line, I got super excited. Now, I almost had a heart attack when I went into the store to see the pricing on some of them. I know Michaels is usually overpriced, but $200 for this? It just seemed really expensive for what it was, and I kind of figured that we could make something a bit cooler. To make things fair, I purchased everything at Michaels. Of course, if you sought these items out at various other places, it would be much cheaper, but I did use a 20% off coupon, and all said and done, I spent about $140 at Michaels on all the materials to make 2 of these, with the exception of a few items. I did buy some concrete from Home Depot, as well as I picked up some PVC. I had some here, but I needed a few more pieces. I will say though, if you had to purchase all the items, you would still spend less than $200 to make these guys, which is pretty awesome. And shows you that it's pretty ridiculous how expensive those man-eating plants were at Michaels. Like I said, I really enjoyed creating these 2 guys. They were super fun. I'm actually glad that I didn't purchase the one from Michaels, because I think the ones that we created came out a lot cooler. Now, of course, you'll notice as you watch the project, there were various stages where you could completely stop and start painting, and I think have some really awesome results just by using the craft pumpkins from Michaels. We all know that they go on sale at the end of the season, so it would be perfect to pick them up and try and recreate these at home. You can start simple and just cut out the mouths and go from there, or you can go way more extra and elaborate like we tend to do. I wanted to show that you can stop where you're comfortable. There were many points during this project where I said to myself, and I said to my husband, this is really cool, it looks awesome, but I always want to push it a little bit further, and I'm so happy that I have, well, 2 Audrey 2s. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. We appreciate the support so much. I know I said this before, but this is a little different than our usual prop makeover videos. We had several requests for some original prop builds, and we figured this fit the bill. I love how they turned out kind of cute, but creepy at the same time. It's one of those things that little kids still want to approach it, but it still will make them nervous. And I just love how the mouths turned out. They seem like they have 2 completely different personalities, which was really the goal. Well, that's all we got for this video. Now's the perfect time to smack that like button. It helps us out as we're growing as a channel and lets us know you guys like the video. If you're interested in any future prop builds, yard hunt videos, prop makeovers, or Halloween vlogs, be sure to click that subscribe button. To make sure that you don't miss out as soon as we post a video, click the notification bell, that way you'll be alerted as soon as we post. Well, y'all asked for it. Hope you enjoyed this prop build. It was a really fun one, and I can't wait to stick these guys on our front porch. We really wanted something that Morticia Adams would proudly display in her atrium. Now remember, if you create it, they will come. Bye, y'all. Right? We need to get a comfier chair. Well, you don't have a chair, you have a pot. What am I thinking? That's a nice pot. I like it. I know, that's a good... You have a nice pot too. Oh, waiting. Feed me, Simo. Feed me all night long. Don't look at me like that. You know I can't help it. Jeez. I know, it's a nice pot. Calm down. You have a very nice pot.